an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Ambassador's Mission, the Traitor Spy Trilogy, Book 1. Covering chapters 7, 8, and 9. A Journey Begins, Signs, and Seeking Truths. In these chapters, Lorkin and Dannyl embark on their journey to Sachaka. Poor Lorkin, I don't think, is ready for what this journey is going to be like. And for her part, Sonea winds up having to come to the rescue of a poor student who has been kind of stigmatized and held a little bit unreasonably responsible for breaking some rules. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you very, very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. I know that Ashleigh was a little bit dismayed when she went to commission it at the end of the last episode, and it was like 2 months out. So it has been a minute since I covered the first 2 sections. But I feel like I remembered most of what's going on here. This is a really funny moment to me because as somebody who has read the other books, I am all too aware of how much of a struggle traveling tends to be in this world. It's kind of remarkable that they have magic at their disposal, but they haven't found a better way to deal with travel. You would think that would have been something that they would have managed to sort of improve on in some way, but it doesn't seem like it. And Lorkin just hasn't done a journey of this magnitude before. And so he has this sort of like, it reminds me of like the first time you're on a plane, but if your first time is as an adult. When you're a kid, it's still fun, you know, like you get to bring books and coloring books, or now I guess you get your iPad and you get like unlimited iPad time for like hours in a row. But as a grown-up, there's like the excitement initially, and then you just sort of realize that it's just a more complicated version of a bus ride, except you're in the air. And there is a really quick loss of excitement that happens where you just, at first you're like, yay! And then all of a sudden you're like, oh God, it's really, the air is bad. I'm hungry. I can't stretch out. This is how far have we got how much left? Shit. And I kind of was amused by the fact that Dannyl is like, I mean, he's done this. He knows. He's fine. This is nothing. But for poor Lorkin, he's just not ready. And that feels true to me. You know, it would ring a little bit false if they just had like this amazing time. Even when you have a road trip with friends, it can be something that you've been looking forward to, and like, for the most part, you're having fun and you're with people you like, listening to podcasts, listening to music, but you still start to get like the wiggles, you know? I want to get up. I want to walk around. I don't want to be in this fucking car anymore. And I feel like road trips are one of those things that people, they get excited about them in theory and they forget about how monotonous they actually are in practice. So, all right. So chapter 7, A Journey Begins. So Lorkin comes out and he's just got like one chest, which Dannyl is very pleased to see that he packs so light. Oh, guys, I wish I knew how to pack light. I wish I knew how to do this. I've done this one time. I packed really light, and it didn't go terribly, to be honest. I was pretty surprised, but it wasn't great either. So Dannyl is pulling up in the carriage to pick him up. And there's an interesting interaction between him and Sonea. Like, I kind of forget, I think, that the two of them aren't particularly close. It's the sort of thing that because I've read their perspectives and they're stories have been linked because of that to me, that I perceive them as being really close friends. And that's not true, actually, at all. He's a little bit afraid of her, which, I mean, makes sense. Everybody is a little bit afraid of her. And he says, right. So she turns to Lorkin and she says, if you need anything, you know what to do. I'm sure I'll be able to buy anything I've forgotten. The Sachakans may have a few barbaric customs, but it sounds like they don't lack for luxuries or practicalities. They regarded each other silently for a long, awkward moment. Well, off you go then. She waved to the carriage like she was shooing a child away, spoiling the impression of a young man venturing independently into the world. Dannyl suspected she would have liked to envelop her son in a hug, but she knew it would embarrass him in front of his friends. So I thought that was cute. But then, yeah, he had told her that he'll keep her son safe. And she's like, I'm going to hold you to that. And for a minute, he gets a little bit like, I will, I promise. And then he says, though if he takes after his mother, I can't be held completely responsible if he gets it into his head to do something foolish. From Rothan, he heard a quiet snort of amusement. Sonea's eyebrows rose, and he expected her to protest, but instead she shrugged. Well, don't complain to me if he causes you trouble. You didn't have to choose him as your assistant. And he says, well, can I still change my mind about taking him? And she looks at him and says, don't tempt me. I hope you find what you're looking for. So there's a little back and forth, but it does feel a little bit unsure between the two of them, where they're trying to do their best. It's just, they don't exactly have the measure of each other that I just assume they do. And Dannyl notices at this point how old Rothan is suddenly looking. He looks so elderly these days, but then so do I. I'll have to make up for that when I return. Yeah, you're never going to see Rothan again. That's my prediction. There's just something about the delivery of that line that really makes me feel like that's it. I hate it. I don't like friends losing each other. Like, losing family is really tough. But it feels like part of life in a predictable way. Losing friends, that's something that has a whole different feel to it, because when you lose family, you assume that it's going to be the family that's older than you. You assume that it will be your elders that begin to pass on. And it's a natural progression of generations. But when you're losing friends, they're often your peers. They're people around the same age as you. And that has a distinctly different feel to it when it happens. I mean, it's much more startling, usually. And it can often feel like a betrayal in some ways, like you thought that the universe understood that that's not how that's supposed to go. So I don't enjoy making this prediction, but I kind of feel like he's thinking, I have to make up for lost time. And you don't get to do that usually in life. If you notice that you have wasted time, you either start making up for that lost time right away, or in this case, it's kind of out of his hands. He's got plans. He's going to be leaving. You realize that you wasted time, and you realize it just in time to truly appreciate how much it sucks that that person is now gone. And I say this as somebody who, I had a gut feeling. The last time I saw my father, I was giving him a hug, and I didn't understand it at the time, but I got really choked up in a way that I didn't get with him. And it startled me, and I got into the car with my then husband, and I just kind of was emotional. And I just told myself to chill out, and that, I was getting older and appreciating seeing my dad, and that's what happens when you start to inch towards not seeing somebody as often and maybe eventually losing them. But I don't know, something in me kind of knew that would be the last time. And in that moment of getting choked up, I made that sort of promise to myself of like, I got to fix this. I got to make up for it. And it was already too late. It was done. And I really wish that he would make some sort of arrangement where he could like do the mind-to-mind communication with Rothan at a given time every day, so that he could, because like at least you could act like, okay, I haven't been around, but you know what, I'm going to call you. I'll keep in touch like from far away. I just really want these two to, like, if they're going to have to part, have it be that their relationship was on good terms when it happened. And I don't know if I'm going to get that. So anyway, he gets into the carriage with Dannyl, and they take off, and he thinks about how Lorkin is just looking just as wistful as he is kind of feeling. And he's surprised at himself for being this melancholy about it. But then he thinks about what's been going on with Tyend. And Tyend has been basically acting like a spoiled brat. It has been days, and Tyend has refused to speak to him the entire time. And even when Dannyl finally told him that he was like taking off, Tyend never responded, didn't say goodbye, nothing. Which I'm really worried about. Like, that is a change in attitude that comes as a bit of a shock. I knew that Dannyl was feeling that Tyend had started to get a little bit too frivolous, I guess is the word. He says something about how Tyend was like more interested in court gossip than anything else. He doesn't actually care about the research. So what does it matter that he's not being allowed to go along? It's weird and makes me wonder, is that all that's going on? Is there something else that, like, some other reason that he wanted to go with Dannyl that Dannyl doesn't even know about, and that's what he's actually reacting to, but Dannyl is just not clued in on that reasoning? I don't know. But yeah, it's just sort of, you know, I feel like he's being so unreasonable that I have to think, oh, there's another secret behind it. And sometimes people are just unreasonable assholes. It's hard to say if that's what's happening here or if it means something more than that, you know? But yeah, he says something about how he has never seen Tyend this angry, which, I mean, it's been years now that they have been together, like over a decade. So if he has never seen the guy this angry, that's not nothing. So he then like looks over at Lorkin and notices how much he looks like his father. And he is thinking about the history behind having had Sachakan spies in the city and whether or not there are any remaining. And he sort of laughs and is like, duh, of course there are still spies. They're just not the kind of spies that we had before, which had been that there were like, you know, ex-slaves from Echani coming in to assassinate people. Now they're just the kind of spies that are sent by other rulers to keep an eye on everything. It's not the same, but they still exist. And, you know, we have this whole thing going on with the thieves. I don't know how to interpret what's happening there, but is that another Sachakan issue, or is that somebody internally? Who knows? Is it one of the guild? So they pass through the North Quarter, through what had been the slums. And Dannyl is just really noticing how much everything has changed and that it's better now than it had been. We know that this has been a mixed blessing. And he says, he's thinking, this recent mess in which magicians and novices of the higher classes had been found in a rowet and gambling house run by smugglers, but claimed to have been given directions to the place by the Lowies. What was most disturbing was that this house had been found hidden down an alley in the inner circle, which had always been thought to be free of such bad establishments, and it hadn't been all that far from Dannyl and Tyend's home. So, honestly, this makes me wonder about Tyend and if there's something going on with his, like, is he connected to what's been going on? Tyend has magic. Right? He's just not as good at magic as Dannyl. Like, he doesn't have quite the same amount of power, if I'm not mistaken. But I really hope that there's nothing, he is not involved in the fucking thieves deal. Martin's in the chat. Hi, Martin. He says he has magic, but he's untrained as far as I know. Okay. Yeah, I wonder about him and the connection to this. Could that be part of this? I don't really get how that would work, though. I don't think so. I think I'm reaching. So then we go to Cery and his POV. They are going to a bowl house called the Good Company. And it's, just a regular old bowl house on the surface. And then downstairs in the basement is the brothel. And they come in and ask for Tarina. Now, Tarina, have we met her before? This is one of those names that's like, that's the one thing that can get confusing about this book series, is that she loves using names that sound really similar to each other. And it can be awfully difficult to remember anybody distinctly because their name sounds like 6 other names, But this is somebody apparently that Cery has some history with it. He used to come and see her all the time. And it's kind of funny that the way this place is set up, it's a bunch of cubicles and they're all like just divided with paper screens. So there's really like practically no privacy, and there's no beds. They're just big, giant armchairs, which I find really interesting. It says, the women here did not want their customers to be so comfortable they'd fall asleep and prevent them servicing more customers, which makes sense. I mean, it really completely does. But it's just funny to me, like this idea that these people are coming in and having sex in an armchair, which just feels like incredibly awkward to me. I mean, it's not awkward I'm not averse to having awkward sex when you are with somebody and things get hot and heavy unexpectedly in a location that you hadn't planned on having sex. And then all of a sudden you're just, in the middle of it. But to like go into a place that this is what you are given as your bed and to initiate sex with this just chair, that feels really strange to me. So he sits down and he finally gets joined by Tarina. A woman with short hair and dark clothing. She was a little too lean and muscular to be called beautiful, but Cery had always found her athletic build attractive, which honestly, all I could think was that it sounds like she looks like Sonea. It sounds like Cery found a sex worker that looks like the girl that he was kind of into for a minute. And he just has a type, So she comes in and apparently he hasn't seen her for like 5 years, which surprised her because he told her that he was getting married, but she kind of has heard that line before, and that has never really meant that a guy just stopped showing up. So the fact that he really did stop showing surprised her a little bit. And she tells him that she never even considered that he was actually loyal to his wife. She figured that he got married and then found a different side chick. And he's like, no, that's just too much work. Absolutely not. So she says that she can tell he's here for business and asks who he needs killed. And she's very, very excited. And he's like, no killing. I just need information. And she's distinctly disappointed by this. She says, why? All the time they want information. Or if they want the full deal, they cowered out of it before I can even get my knives sharp. Will the information lead to the full deal? And Cery's looking at her like, this bitch, she's a little crazy. Like, I like her. And that's part of what I found intriguing about her. But like, let's be honest, she's a little not right. And I found that kind of funny. So yeah, he basically tells her like, all right, look, if somebody needs killing, I'm gonna do it. I'm not hiring you to do it. I just need to figure out who it is needs killing. That's fine. And she asks what he wants to know. And he says, who broke into my hideout and killed my wife and sons? And she just stares for a moment because obviously she thought this was business. She thought this was thieves shit. This is a personal matter, and it's a huge loss. His wife and sons, plural. Like, his whole family, gone. She understands immediately the gravity of this, you know? So, at that point, when she realizes, like, the level of information he's looking for, he wants her to basically drop a dime on a colleague, which is extremely, it's taken a risk that is going to cost a lot. And she is thinking about, like, all of the potential aspects of this, but she doesn't really have a lot of information for him initially. You know, she says something about how it's weird that she hasn't heard about this, because most assassins, if they were able to get into a thieves' hideout, they'd be bragging about that shit. That's an impressive thing, and they would want people to know they were capable of it. So the fact that she hasn't heard about it, she thinks that maybe they weren't even trying to kill his family. They were there for him, and his family happened to see him, and they wound up having to kill his family because otherwise they could tag him, as she puts it. If only there was a way I could be sure. And she says every killer has their leavings, signs, habits, skills. You can tag them from those if you've got enough killings to compare. I'd tell you the details about the thief hunter, except we're keeping them to ourselves for now in case one of us is the killer. And he's like, all right, fine. Like, I kind of thought that he might push her a little, press and see if she would give up anything. But then it immediately says, when Tarina said she would not give any more information, nothing could charm her out of it, or charm it out of her. Sorry, I haven't been much help. Can't do anything but get you spooked about someone you already know about, and I can't tell you anything useful about. Can't really charge you much for that. But I can tell you something that nobody seems to be really taking seriously. People reckon the thief hunter uses magic. And he's like, oh, fuck, here it is. And he says, why do they say that? And she says that there have been people who have seen, like, lights, things flying through the air, and a lot of folks just don't buy it. It's an unusual thing for there to be a rogue magician around. It's funny to me that people are not buying it as much as they aren't, though. Because, I mean, this is not something that the city isn't familiar with. We have had magician assassins before. I don't know why they're all, you know, it's just a weird thing to me. So he says he suddenly thought of Skellen's obvious desire to hire his own rogue magician. If this thief hunter is a rogue, he'll have no problem getting close to Skellen. Should I warn Skellen? But surely he'll have already heard the rumors of magic. Maybe that's why he asked about magic. He knew I'd had connections to the guild in the past and was testing me to see if I still did, which would mean he suspected I'd hired the thief hunter. But then he realizes maybe a thief thought that this... had a thief come to this conclusion and sent an assassin to kill me, not realizing they'd hired the very same magic-wielding assassin they feared so much? At least I know it couldn't have been Skellen, as he wouldn't have arranged to meet with me and sent an assassin to kill me in my home at the same time. So, yeah, basically, he has nothing. I mean, the magic thing is the one thing he's got, but really there's very little to go on here. And eventually later, when he's talking to Gaul comes up with the concept of setting a trap that the magician himself will not even realize is a trap, which I think is actually a pretty clever idea. It's not even like, and when I say doesn't realize it's a trap, I mean, obviously it can't be a trap if somebody knows it's a trap. But what Gaul means is they will let him out of it. They won't like try and like take him down in such a way as the guy never realizes that this was a trap in the first place. They are just trying to observe him and not catch him. And that's the thing that somebody would probably be looking for, is to get gripped up. So then we go to Sonea's POV. And she's looking around at Austin's setup because she just remembers, of course, really clearly what it looked like when Akarim was here. And wonders if he knows about like the secret passage to the university that's behind the paneling. And she realizes that Lorkin didn't know. So probably Austin doesn't know either, which is interesting. And what's happening here is they are in the middle of a reprimand of a couple of higher class students, they had been caught at this place called the Nameless. And it said, Sonea had been dismayed to realize the two magicians found at the house were Lorkin's friends. The pair glanced at each other, then at the floor. We were given a slip of paper. It gave directions to the best new playhouse in the city. There'd be free things for the first 50 customers. And it was in the inner circle, so we assumed it was safe. And they still have the paper. They hand that over. It's like a good quality, thick paper. And Austin thinks that they might be able to find something out about it. And Vanna holds it up. And when Austin does, he says that he can see the part of the guild's mark on the paper. Now, this could be something that points to the fact that it's someone in the guild. Or it could be pointing to the guild because somebody is setting them up. I'm sure it's not hard to like sneak in and get a piece of guild paper and tear it up and make it look like whatever you want. And they say that when they got there, they found gambling, drinking, rowett braziers, and women for hire. Lord Raider here losing badly in some new game. Lord Sharon near comatose from inhaling rowett smoke. Overall, these 2 plus 12 novices were engaged in sampling the full range of products on offer. And what part did you take, Lord Regin, in black magic, Sonea? Regin says, I was informed by a concerned novice who had overheard that there may be some mischief taking place, though not of the specifics. Knowing that black magic Sonea has been taking an interest in the debate over the rule against magicians associating with criminals, I told her what I'd heard in the hopes she had clearer information. She did not. But I went looking for it when I was free to, Sonea asked, and I was given an address. I sought permission to leave the guild, but by the time it was given, several novices and magicians had already been lured to the playhouse. And Austin's like, well, why didn't you have somebody else go then? And she's kind of irritated by this, even though she understands that everybody is still like, they do not trust her. And Regin cuts in and says that they decided to keep it to themselves because they didn't want too many people finding out about the place. Which it's sort of funny because she has this moment of like, hey, buddy, thanks for having my back. And then she's like, oh my God, this is Regin. How am I even feeling this way about him? So Austin tells them that the playhouse has been shut down, which the fact that it's called a playhouse is really hilarious to me. I mean, you guys couldn't come up with another way to say this. It's just so like weird and childish and creepy. But yeah, he says, you guys, he looks at the kids and he's like, you're supposed to be examples. Like, you're not just novices. You're magicians. This is not appropriate behavior and you need to fucking clean up your act. But I'm going to give you another chance to do that. Sonea is watching this and she's kind of side-eyeing the whole thing. Like, low-key, Sonea is just like, oh, wow, the rich kids are getting another chance to do right and be better. That's sweet. Fuck you. Like, she's salty about it. And she's not wrong, man. She knows that if they were from lower class families, they would be given very different treatment. And she's just she's just got that perspective, you know? So then, he says the novices should be punished under the rules of the university. I will refer the matter to the university administrator. And Sonea says, knowing my luck, they'll end up at the hospices where all the vices that got them into trouble are available mere streets away. They'll slip away as soon as they get a chance and I'll be blamed for it, which is really interesting. I wonder like how much of a problem that already is, that's like where her mind went. But I'm interested to see if her prediction there is true and how that winds up going. So he looks at Regin and says, in future, we should all work together to prevent this sort of thing happening again. You may go. And they step outside And she talks to the two kids. They're not kids, but they're younger than her. And she asks about the Roa and what it is about it that makes people like go so nuts for it. And Reader is just like, it just makes you feel good, like you don't have a care in the world. And it says she had noticed that Sharon's expression had shifted to one of longing, while Raider only looked resigned. Which I like that distinction. There are people who are just kind of like, yeah, it's a nice thing. And then there are people who are just like craving it, you know. And she asks them if Lorkin has ever taken part, and they tell her that he did once and didn't like it. And for a minute, she wonders if they're lying. But then she's like, if they were lying, I think they'd just tell me that he'd never done it. I don't think they'd say, yeah, he tried it and just didn't like it. And she lets them know that they're kind of lucky to have gotten away with this, which they seem aware of. And Regin tells her after that Lorkin's too smart to be caught up in Roet taking. All the same good sense will keep him out of trouble in Sachaka. I only wish my own daughters had half his maturity. Now here comes, for me, some real evidence that Regin is growing as a person. Because this is the main thing to me. Like, you know, people talk a lot about cancel culture. And for me, the whole concept of cancel culture, it's not anything. It's really, really rare for somebody to be actually canceled, for them to actually suffer consequences. It almost never happens. When they are a celebrity, there may be like a backlash initially. Think pieces will be written. Do these people usually get like stopped being hired, or do they get specials canceled? No, it's so rare. So I don't really even think cancel culture is like a thing. But I do feel that people will argue you should let people make mistakes. You should let them make up for it and do better. And while I understand the impulse to feel that way and to give people the benefit of the doubt, my main issue is that people want to give people, like celebrities, the benefit of the doubt when that celebrity has not shown any indication that they even understand why people are angry. And that, for me, means that they are not going to try and do better because they don't know what they did wrong to begin with. And you can tell via the really sad, predictable, quote, apologies that celebrities will put out into the world, whether or not they actually know what they did and are willing to take responsibility for it and admit that they fucked up, versus acting like, well, you guys just took it the wrong way. I didn't mean it like that. You shouldn't have taken it like that. And I have no patience for that. If somebody really genuinely seems to be like, wow, guys, I'm really sorry. I appreciate you reaching out to me and explaining to me. I tend to be a lot more forgiving, and nobody's perfect. So in this conversation, Regin gives me that. She says, judging by the small amount of gossip she had heard about Regin's daughters, they were very childish young women. And he says they take after their mother, though there's enough cruelty in their rivalry to remind me of myself at their age. It's bad enough looking back and regretting your youthful arrogance without having to then regret your offsprings as well. And I like this. He says cruelty. He uses that word, which is the thing. You know, that's something that I just do not understand. I don't understand cruelty for the sake of it. I understand lashing out in rage when it's sort of a lash out in an attempt to grab onto some kind of justice that you feel like you have not been getting. When it's cruelty, it's for the fun of the pain you cause. And that is not something I ever understood. And the fact that he sees his behavior for what it is makes me feel better, and makes me wonder how his daughters can behave the way they do when they have a father who seems so aware. But he says they take after their mother, and I don't know if we've met his wife or know who she is. I'm curious about her. Okay, so chapter 8. Signs. We get the, description of Dannyl and Lorkin and, how tedious this traveling has been. And he's sort of wondering about Sachaka because he knows that his own father, Acheron, stumbled into Sachaka, got like picked up by Ichani, that there was this whole thing going on that is no longer happening. So this visit is just going to be to such a different Sachaka than the one that his father knew, that it's a weird thing where he has this sort of feeling of like kinship with his dad, that he's going there and his father has been there too. But also, like, it's just a completely different circumstance and everything about it will be completely different. So in that way, he feels very far removed. And also, he's only going to be Dannyl's assistant. He's not an ambassador in his own right. So he isn't going to be given the kind of respect and acknowledgement that Dannyl will be given, almost guaranteed. So he mentions here that he found a ring in a ring box in his chest that morning, buried amongst a bunch of his stuff. And there's no note with it, but he knows that it's the blood gem ring of his mother's, and that she likely slipped it into his trunk so that if he needs to talk to her in some way or connect with her, they can do it that way. Which I think that was a really smart idea. You know, I was talking about trying to make a phone call and reconnect with people, and this is about as close as they're going to get, you know. He and Dannyl had begun each day's journey by listing off the members of the most powerful Sachakan families several times, recalling key characteristics and alliances, correcting and helping each other memorize them. They had gone over what they knew of Sachakan society and speculated where there were gaps in their knowledge. Lorkin noticed signs of nervousness and uncertainty in his companion. He felt almost an equal to the older magician, but he was sure that would change once they arrived and had to assume their roles. So, yeah, that's interesting. He felt almost an equal, like, just because of the nervousness? Because, like, buddy, I'm going to guess you're not an equal, like, in magic either. But I don't know that. I mean, Sonea is unusually powerful. And that's before the black magic. Acheron had been pretty powerful. So maybe he has got just like, he's got an unusually like high level going on. So the carriage comes to a stop and they are in this, inn, Fergan's Rest, where they go inside for the night. And there's this young woman who's sort of like flirting with, she's a kind of a waitress, I guess. And she's like giving Lorkin some looks. And Dannyl asks whether he should be preserving Lorkin's virtue. And he says, as an older and wiser companion, I feel at this moment a strange urge to steer you away from temptation for the sake of your health and wallet. Your concern is noted, Lorkin said, smiling. Should I offer the same service in return? Dannyl looked up at Lorkin, his expression guarded and serious for a moment. Then he smiled. Of course, we shall look out for one another. Then he gave a short, quiet laugh, though I suspect you may have a much easier task than I. Question. This is one of those moments where I feel like it could mean a couple things. He looks at Lorkin, and, you know, we know that Dannyl's gay. Is he responding to this because he doesn't know if Lorkin knows, or if Lorkin's making a reference to that, or what? There's almost, when Lorkin says, should I offer the same service in return, there's almost a way you could take that as being flirtatious, but I don't think that's how Dannyl interpreted it. Or maybe he's just sort of like laughing at the idea that, like, you know, he just has this like moment where it says his expression is guarded and serious for a moment. I feel like he interpreted that some way for a second and then sort of like relaxed and didn't in the end. But I'm curious what ran through his mind at that moment. So then we go to Cery's POV. And he's thinking about the outer wall and the way that they like would pass through the sewers, and that there had been a change to the way that the city guard would occasionally flush it out, and keep people from using it in that way. But eventually they were able to create a signaling system to let people know that the flushing was about to occur so that they could get out of the way. And now, because the thieves have sort of all turned on each other and everybody's like in factions, they don't really signal anymore. And sometimes they purposely let it happen to get rid of people. It was rumored that this was how the thief who drowned had been killed. A watcher upstream had been murdered by the thief hunter, and not only had the thief died, but all the watchers downstream as well. So, yeah, that's bleak. Let's see. Oh, Martin says, I kind of took it as friendly banter. Well, Lorkin's kind of implying he might be unfaithful to his partner. That's true. I guess that's my question, is how much does Lorkin know that Tyend is his partner? Is like, because, you know, it's sort of treated like people can't know, but it feels like pretty much everyone knows. And as long as they're discreet, it's okay. But I wonder about him bringing it up, you know, like how aggressive is that perceived to be as a move? Or is Dannyl aware that Lorkin knows and they're just kind of like, you know, they accept that on each other? I don't know. So he's talking to Gull, and this is where Gull is suggesting about like setting the trap, and using Cery as bait, except not really. And Cery is kind of happy to have something new to focus on, to be honest. He is just, you know, he had been sort of lost in grief. And now that he has something to do and a mission, it's making him feel a little bit better, which makes complete sense. So finally, Dannyl and Lorkin, they reached the fort on the outskirts of Imardine, Curalia. Imardine's the city, right? And Curalia is the country. And I love this. So let's see. Watcher Orton. Orton is kind of lonely and he wants them to stay over, and they can't really do that. They have to like really get a move on here. And you can see that he's a bit disappointed, but then he's like, well, all right, we'll change out your horses and get out and you can walk around, maybe have some refreshment. And Lorkin has never seen the fort before and is just kind of impressed with it. He literally like gasps out loud. And there are some areas where there's like huge cracks and it's obvious that that's the damage from the battle. Did we replace the traps that were originally here? Some, Orton shrugged. Most were simple barriers designed to delay and use up an attacker's strength. We have installed a more complex system of defense to replace them. Tricks that might catch an invader if their guard was lowered, illusions that will waste their power, but nothing that could hold off a group of powerful Sachakan black magicians for long, which is why we've spent as much time and energy creating means of escaping the fort as well. So that's kind of interesting that they have just like figured out a way to just get the fuck out instead of trying to like worry about holding them off. We know that our strength lies in numbers, so getting out and joining up with a larger force is the way to deal with this. They come across a memorial to those who died defending this place. And there is this like moment of Dannyl recognizing Fergan's name on the memorial and just being like, oh, that fuck. And I really enjoy that. Fucking Fergan. I hate him. I'm so glad he's dead. So, I mean, hopefully he's dead. I don't know. Maybe he's not dead. Did we know that he's dead? Did we see him die? What if he's not? Because he says, from what I recall, Fergan was dragged out of some hiding place by the Sachakans. But, I mean, if he hadn't died, then they'd know, right? Right. Martin says we saw his throat being slit. Okay. Yay. So, they go through the tunnel to the other side, and they explain that this was once a door that was dropped down to block the tunnel. I do wonder why the magicians who built the fort, who were black magicians themselves, thought such things would slow down an invader. Every little bit of power used by the enemy might be a life saved. And Orton's like, yeah, maybe, I guess. So they get back on the road again, and says that, if you come back, stay overnight. Come on, keep me some company, guys. And as they pass through, Lorkin mentions that now they're officially in Sachaka, which Dannyl didn't really process, and he realizes that Lorkin's right, and it kind of freaks him out a little bit, because they're officially in a no man's land here, where a lot can happen, and while their government would lash out if something were to happen, because he's an official ambassador, Dannyl recognizes that he just kind of has to rely on the promise that somebody would do something, because even though he has magic, he knows that just the two of them are not going to be a match for the black magicians. They're just not. And they have to kind of rely on this reputation, that Keralian magicians managed to overcome the Sachakans somehow, without anybody really knowing the details, and so kind of glide along on the inflated sense of their abilities, which, that you got to do that sometimes. You just kind of have to let your representation or your reputation carry you, And Lorkin, for his part, he's never seen this wasteland, and we know how it was made, but it's clearly kind of been lost to time, and they're theorizing on what could have happened, why it was created, and it's really a long journey through this. We find out later that they'd been going through the wasteland for 3 days before they finally come to actual civilization again and growing things. Other than that, it's just a wasteland. It's called that. It's dust and sand and bare dirt and ruins, and that's all. For 3 solid days. That is bleak. And once they finally get into Sachaka proper, it's just kind of this, the sight for sore eyes, very literally. They are so sick of being where they're at and seeing nothing but just gray, dead land. And it's a relief to come across these beautiful homes and gardens and everything being lush and growing again. So chapter 9, Seeking Truths, we go back to Sonea's POV, and she is watching this poor kid, this novice named Norin. It says, like many low-born novices from the poorer parts of the city, Norin was of small stature, which, nutritionally, it all makes sense. And she's thinking about how pulling him before the whole guild is kind of a dick move. And normally they would just have a hearing before the high magicians. But somebody wanted to make an example of him. And it says if he hadn't been found right before a meet day, he might have been spared this. But it's much easier to tack a hearing onto the end of a meet than arrange a separate one. I suspect if Osen had been faced with getting the whole guild together just for this hearing, he'd have bent the rules and kept it to the higher magicians. So, yeah, for Norin, this is just bad luck. And, I don't know, as a reader at this point, what he's being brought in for. But we find out he's a novice who just took off from the guild grounds for 2 months. And that he has been talked to and told to bring back, or told to come back. And they wound up having to bring him back by force. And they are basically just like, dude, what the fuck? You know what the rules are. Why did you do this? And he says, I don't want to be a magician. I'd want to if I didn't want to look after my family more. My mother and my little brother and sisters, my mother can't look after them. She's sick. And nobody else can take on this responsibility, Osen said. No, my sister, next oldest after me, died last year. The rest are too young. I didn't use magic once. I know I'm not supposed to if I'm not going to be a magician. If you do not wish to be a magician, if you wish to leave the guild, you must have your powers blocked, Osen told him. The novice blinked, then looked up at the administrator with such hope that Sonea felt a pain in her chest. You can do that? Norin said in a barely audible voice. Then I can go look after my family and nobody will mind? He frowned. It doesn't cost a lot, does it? Osen said nothing, then shook his head. It costs nothing, except in lost opportunities for yourself. Can't you wait a few more years? Wouldn't it be better for your family if you were a magician? Norin's face darkened. No. I can't see them. I can't get money to them. I can't make Mother's sickness go away. And the others are too young to look after themselves. So they sit down, all of the, the muckety-mucks, and talk about this. And Venara says, the boy's mother is a whore. She's not sick. She's addicted to Rowett. Which, that she is sick. But a lot of people don't see it that way. And everybody is sort of like, this would be a real waste because he's actually kind of gifted. And it would be a shame if we blocked his powers when he's got these abilities. And Geralt says that he's too young to know what he's giving up. He will regret sacrificing magic for the sake of his family. And Sonea says, but he would regret it more if he sacrificed his family for magic. Which, yeah, dude, he's not sacrificing for the sake of his family, so they can get a new boat or a nicer car. They are children with nobody to care for them, dude. It's just such a moment of a person really having no frame of reference for what it means to be impoverished and have nobody to turn to. That they just are like, well, just figure something out. From where? How? Huh? What are you talking about? Oh, I have no patience for this. And can I just say that I love how when they tell him, well, you have to have your powers blocked then. And his response is immediately, does that cost a lot to do? Because, oh my God, of course you would assume it costs money because you don't have any. And nobody told you that this was even an option. So you probably assume they didn't tell you because they figure it's too expensive for you or something. Seeing everything in the terms of money when that is not how these people see things because they've always had it and they don't have to fucking worry about it. So Osen is asking Sonea, what do you think we should do? And she's like, how about we let him fucking visit his fucking family, you fucking jags. And all of them are sort of like, well, I don't know about that. And Geralt says that would result in guild money going to a whore and no doubt feed her addiction. To which Sonea says, plenty more guild money goes towards hiring the services of whores each night that would be required to keep Norin's family fed and accommodated for the year. And they all sort of stop, and Lady Venara covers her mouth a little bit. And I think at the moment Sonea interprets that as her being shocked and horrified. But I was like, oh, Venara is into this. I could tell. I was just like, oh, she's covering her mouth because she's smirking. And she agrees. And sure enough, later on, she's like, hey, Sonea, how come you don't bust out with the savagery a little bit more often? Because we need it up in here. It will have to be up to Norin to ensure the money he gives his mother does not go towards Rowett. It's clearly not his aim to kill his mother. If he agrees to stay, send him to the hospices to work, as punishment if you must. I will arrange for his family to visit. That way he can see them and be seen to be disciplined for breaking the law. And Lord Austin's like, yeah, and it would be good if you got her to also break her addiction. And she doesn't say anything to that. She just looks at him like, dude, I can't work miracles. Shut up. That's not even on the table, but fine. We'll just I won't say anything and we'll pretend that's even an option. So when they go and tell Norin what Sonea suggested, she sees this look on his face. It's just too much adoration, as she puts it. And she's like, ooh, I'm going to have to crack down on him a little bit so he doesn't think that I'm favoring him too much, or that when he breaks rules, he'll just get a perfect solution given to him. And And Vinara, when she talks to Sonea after, says, this case clearly demonstrates the need to make a prompt decision on whether to change or abolish the rule against associating with criminals and characters of low repute. I am in favor of a clarification. The rule is too easily interpreted in a way that would restrict the work of my healers. So let's see. And then she says, Sonea says, there are sure to be remarks made that stated publicly may cause lasting resentment if they open it up to the guild. And Vinara says, oh, I don't think we can avoid that. But it will cause a lot more fuss and work, and Osen is not sure the issue warrants that. And Sonea says, well, maybe Norn's case will convince him otherwise. So I guess we'll see what comes of that. So we go back to Lorkin. I kind of covered this already, that he and Dannyl have finally managed to get into an area that is peopled again. They're staying with somebody, were to visit and stay with an Ashleigh. Lorkin was not sure how much of the nervous tingle of anticipation he felt at finally meeting a Sachakan was excitement or dread. Dannyl had met with the Sachakan ambassador in Mardin, but Lorkin had not been confirmed as his assistant at the time, and so was not invited to the meeting. So, yeah, the carriage slows down. He looks out and sees all of these, like, white buildings with curved edges and, just a lot of bright colors. And they meet a slave. And Lorkin is, like, low-key not ready for this. Like, I knew that this was coming, but I'm not, like, I don't feel right about it. It just makes me super uncomfortable, is, like, what's running through his mind here. And Dannyl says, take us to your master. His tone was neither commanding, nor did it sound like a request. Lorkin decided this was a good compromise and resolved to do the same when addressing a slave. I mean, like, honestly, what do you do? You know? I mean, this is so... I have hardly any time left. I kind of have to fly through this. So they meet Ashleigh Tariko. And he's shorter, but he's like kind of a wide, powerful looking guy. And, he's telling people to go and like alert the kitchen that they're here and all of this stuff. And it's just, again, this sort of like culture of these people just being at his beck and call in a way that Lorkin isn't used to. And then he notices that Ashleigh is wearing like a knife at his belt, which is the kind of thing that black magicians wear. And he at first is sort of like, oh shit, he's a black magician. Oh no. And then immediately is like, oh, like your fucking mom, dude. Hey, not so impressive. Not that exotic. Get over it. Which I found really funny because I didn't even think of it that way. And he pays a lot of attention to the way everybody is served. The master of the house goes first. Magicians get served before non-magicians. Ashleigh before landless free men. Age before youth. Men before women. Only if a woman was a magician and head of her family would she be served before men. And women often ate separately from men anyway. Which makes him wonder, does this guy even, is he married or not? Which we don't know yet. So... yeah, he's just really having a lot of trouble adjusting to the slave thing, looking around, realizing that these people are considered property. Has anyone here attempted to reclaim land from the wastes? Many. Of course we have, Tariko's expression seemed to say, which I'm like, yeah, duh. You think, it really is the kind of question that like colonizers ask. Has it ever occurred to you to do this like incredibly obvious thing that might help you? Ugh, get over yourself. And he says every few years it rains in the northern desert, and within a few days the land turns green. The soil is rich with ash from the volcanoes. It's only the lack of rain that keeps it a desert. We have plenty of rain here, but still nothing grows, which is interesting. I wonder if there's a way, like, can these magicians affect the weather? It feels like these magicians are not as ambitious as I want them to be, honestly. So yeah, they have their dinner, they chat with one another. Everything seems to be like, things are going pretty well between the two of them, or between the three of them, I suppose. And then they are sent to bed, and then we go to Cery. And Cery is trying to set this trap and is using the same lockmaker, which Gull is sort of like, does that seem like a good idea? Because he thinks that maybe the lockmaker was the one responsible for like getting, like maybe he betrayed them. There's just maybe a possibility that this guy's involved, and Cery doesn't even want to consider that. And he's just, you know, continuing on with, I'm so over time, guys. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm kind of wondering if I may, because there isn't like, well, there's not that much left. Okay. I'm just going to go over. So I've always found Dern to be habitually thorough to the point of ridiculousness, and I think that's why he made it like that, not that he knew anything about the thief hunter and his methods. So yeah, he's talking about the fact that there's a way built into the lock to tell if it's magic, and Gull is kind of suspicious of that, but I think it makes a ton of sense to do it that way. You want people to know, I can't help it if it's magic. I can build an amazing lock that withstands regular people. I don't want you thinking that somebody picked it because I'm bad at my job. They have magic. There's only so much I can do. But Gull is sort of like weird about it, you know? So he's also sort of arguing about whether it's a magician at all. He thinks that maybe it's like this lock was like a setup to make you think that somebody used magic when they didn't at all. Blah, blah, blah. I just don't understand, again, why everybody's so resistant to the idea that it's somebody with magic doing this, because this has fucking happened many times. Many, many times, y'all. It's just, why is this so out of the question? It's weird to me. So Cery has this hideout set up, and he knows that one of his workers eventually is going to leak the location of it. And it says he found out everything he could about them. If they had family, if they cared about that family, if they had debts, who they had worked for in the past, who had worked for them, if there was anyone, the guard especially, they'd rather not encounter. And Cery, it says, for the trap to work, Cery needed someone to leak information. But if I don't take some precautions, the hunter might think it out of character and become suspicious. So yeah, he has to make this obviously, this trap seem as little like a trap as possible. And Gull says at one point to Cery that maybe any of the workers are a hunter. You know, they're calling this person, by the way, the thief hunter, and hunter for short. And he's like, one of them might be the guy, and they just have a day job because they need to fucking feed themselves. That's not out of the question. And Cery's like, well, he might be rich, you know? Once it would have been a safe bet to assume the hunter was rich. Only rich people learned magic. But these days, people of all classes could join the guild. And if the hunter couldn't afford to bribe people, he could always blackmail and threaten them, possibly more effectively using magic to scare people. So this chapter ends with Cery thinking that he really wishes that he could talk to Sonea and just ask if anybody has sort of gone missing. And the thing is, like, we just saw Norin, was that his name? And he had been missing for months, but he has like a really good reason for that. And he seems very eager to come back to the school if he can. So there are people that have sort of like fallen off the grid a little bit, but it doesn't feel like they're connected. And he also wants to have proof before he talks to her about it. So this trap has been laid, and we just have to wait and see how it goes. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up. I'm so sorry I'm so over time, but thank you again so much to Ashleigh for commissioning this. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I hope you enjoyed the coverage, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.